My name is Elena. I'm 32 years old. And for 15 straight Christmases, I spent the holiday alone. Not because I wanted to. Not because I didn't love my family. But because every year, without explanation, I was left out. While other people woke up to crowded living rooms and noisy kitchens, I woke up to silence. My phone stayed quiet. No calls. No texts. No, Merry Christmas. Instead, I learned about my family gatherings the same way every year, by scrolling through photos online. There they were. My mother. My sister. Aunts, uncles, cousins. 20+ people squeezed together at my grandmother's beach house, all smiling like nothing in the world was missing. Except me. Before I go any further, if stories about family betrayal, quiet resilience, and finally reclaiming your place hit close to home, take a second to like and subscribe. Only if this resonates with you. And while you're here, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every comment. For a long time, I believed it had to be my fault. The first photo I remember was posted when I was 17. December 26th. I was home from school, sitting on my bed, when the image popped up on my screen. Everyone was wearing matching red sweaters, standing in front of the fireplace at my grandmother's house. Gifts stacked high. Laughter frozen in pixels. I wasn't there. I called my mom that night. My voice shook when I asked why. She sounded annoyed, like I'd interrupted something trivial. "Oh honey, we thought you were busy. Didn't I tell you?" She hadn't. The excuses changed every year. "We assumed you were working. We thought you had plans. You're always welcome, why didn't you just come?" Eventually, I stopped asking. Once, when I was 23, I tried something different. I drove to the beach house without telling anyone. I told myself that if I just showed up, they'd have to acknowledge me. They did. Just not the way I hoped. When my mother opened the door, her face drained of color. Behind her, I heard my sister's voice, sharp and unmistakable. "Did anyone invite her?" The room went quiet. 23 people stared at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule. I stayed the night. No one saved me a seat at dinner. No one asked how I'd been. I left the next morning before sunrise and never tried again. After that, Christmas became something I survived instead of celebrated. I learned how to cook small meals for one. I learned how to pretend it didn't hurt. I learned how to smile at coworkers when they asked about my holiday plans. And then, last January, my grandmother died. I didn't find out from my family. I found out from a social media post. No call. No warning. Just a photo of her smiling in her garden with a caption that said, "Rest in peace." I drove 4 hours for the funeral. When I arrived, the service had already started. No one told me the time had changed. I sat in the back row. My mother never turned around. My sister glanced at me once and looked away. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. A man introduced himself as a lawyer. He told me my grandmother had left instructions, very specific ones. He asked me to come meet him privately. And that was the moment everything I thought I knew about my family began to crack. Quick question before I continue, do you believe family deserves loyalty no matter what, or does respect have to be earned? Comment loyalty or respect. I'm genuinely curious. Because what that lawyer revealed would put me in direct collision with the people who spent 15 years pretending I didn't exist. And by the time the next Christmas arrived, they would finally see me. Just not in the way they expected. I'll tell you what my grandmother secretly did years before she died, and why the lawyer warned me not to tell my family a single word. 3 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, my phone rang while I was washing dishes in my Raleigh apartment. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Midday. I assumed it was spam or a wrong call. But something in me hesitated, like my body knew this wasn't random. "Hello?" Is this Elena Carter? A man asked, calm and measured. Yes. My name is Harold Finch. I was your grandmother's attorney. I froze. My grandmother had an attorney? No one had ever mentioned that. Not my mother. Not my sister. No one. I need to meet with you, he continued. Privately. And I want to be very clear about something, you should not inform anyone in your family about this call. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I turned off the sink. Is something wrong? I asked. There was a pause. Not the kind that feels uncertain, the kind that feels intentional. No, Ms. Carter, he said gently. Something is very right. Before I continue, if you've ever had a moment where one phone call changed the direction of your life, tap like. You'll understand why soon. We met the next morning in his office downtown. Brick building. Old wood floors. The kind of place where important decisions are made quietly. Harold Finch was older than I expected. Silver hair. Steady hands. Eyes that looked like they'd seen families tear themselves apart and put themselves back together again. He didn't waste time. He slid an envelope across the desk toward me. Your grandmother instructed me to give you this first. My name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. Her handwriting. I opened it carefully, like the paper might disappear if I moved too fast. Inside was a letter. She wrote that I was the only one who visited her without wanting anything. That I called just to hear her voice. That I sat with her when she was scared, when she was lonely, when she was sick. Then I reached the line that made my breath catch. I'm leaving you the beach house. I looked up, stunned. The beach house. Harold nodded. The deed. The property. Everything. She finalized it years ago and reinforced it legally multiple times. The same house. The one my family gathered in every Christmas. The one I wasn't invited to. If this story is already making you uncomfortable, in a good way, comment, keep going, so I know you're still with me. She anticipated resistance, Harold added. That's why the will is airtight. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind replayed 15 years of photos. Smiles. Sweaters. Dinners I never sat at. How much is it worth? I asked quietly. Roughly 2.3 million. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. The one thing my mother cherished most, had never been hers. Harold leaned forward. There's something else. Your grandmother left instructions for this exact moment. He opened a drawer and handed me a second, smaller envelope. Inside was one line. Take your time. But when you're ready, stop being invisible. I sat there holding that note like it weighed more than the house itself. Do you want me to notify your family? Harold asked. 15 Christmases flashed through my head. 15 years of silence. 15 years of being forgotten. No, I said. Not yet. He nodded slowly. She predicted you'd say that. I walked out of that office with keys in my purse and a secret no one else knew. For the next 11 months, I lived two lives. One where I was just Elena, working, paying rent, eating lunch alone. And another where I quietly became the legal owner of the place my family thought they controlled. February passed. Easter came and went, no invitation. Summer photos flooded social media. I saved every single one. Documentation. Before I go on, tell me this, if someone ignores you for years, do they deserve an explanation when the power finally shifts? Comment yes or no. I want your honest take. Because by the time Christmas came back around, I had a plan. And I was done waiting to be seen. I'll explain why I waited almost a full year, what my family unknowingly paid for during that time, and how patience became my greatest weapon. People ask me why I didn't say anything right away. Why I didn't call my mother the moment I walked out of the lawyer's office. Why I didn't send the group text. Why I didn't show up waving paperwork and demanding answers. The truth is simple. I needed time. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. Harold transferred the deed in February. Quietly. Legally. Completely. When he handed me the keys, he didn't smile. He just said, "It's official." I put them in my purse and went to work like it was any other Tuesday. And that's how the next 11 months went. On the outside, nothing changed. On the inside, everything did. Easter came. No invitation. July arrived. My sister's birthday weekend. Instagram flooded with photos of champagne on the deck, kids running through the living room, my mother raising a glass in my kitchen. I saved every photo. If you're wondering why, stick with me, because this part matters more than you think. September brought something unexpected. An email, forwarded accidentally, from a family group chat I'd never been part of. My aunt was responding to my mother. "Mom's beach house needs maintenance. I'm scheduling a contractor next month." I read it 3 times. My mother was planning renovations. On a house she no longer owned. I called Harold immediately. "What do I do?" He laughed once. Just once. "Nothing," he said. Let her. Let her spend money on my house." "Yes. Keep the invoices. She's improving your asset." October came. The contractor showed up. New roof shingles. Fresh paint on the deck. Upgraded appliances in the kitchen. $12,000, paid by my mother, unknowingly, for a property that legally belonged to me. I felt something shift inside me then. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Quick pause. Have you ever benefited from someone underestimating you? Comment yes if patience ever worked in your favor. November was when I started planning. Not emotionally. Logistically. I reviewed documents. Printed copies. Organized folders. I didn't rehearse speeches or imagine confrontations. I focused on facts. Ownership. Boundaries. 1 week before Christmas, I made a call I never thought I'd make. The Dare County Sheriff's Office. "I'd like to report a potential trespassing situation," I said calmly. "I own a property in the Outer Banks, and I believe multiple individuals may attempt to enter without permission on December 24th. The deputy asked for proof. I had it all. Deed. Title. Tax records. Will. Notarized. Verified. We agreed to meet Christmas Eve morning. Before hanging up, the deputy hesitated. "Ma'am, family situations can get complicated." "They already are," I said. "I'm just ending the confusion." That night, my phone rang. Aunt Patty. The only relative who ever asked about me. "I just wanted to check on you," she said softly. "I always wondered why you were never at Christmas." "You'll understand soon," I told her. She paused. "Elena, what are you planning?" "For once," I said, smiling, "I'm just showing up." I packed my bag and went to sleep. On December 23rd, I arrived at the beach house just as the sun dipped into the water. The new lock turned smoothly with my key. My mother's old key wouldn't work anymore. I stood in the entryway for a long moment, breathing in salt air and old wood. The last time I'd been here, I felt like a guest who overstayed. Now, I owned every inch. I walked room to room slowly. The living room. The kitchen she renovated. The master bedroom she always claimed. Mine now. On the mantel, I found a framed photo, 23 people in matching sweaters. No space for me. I placed it face down. Then I found another frame in my grandmother's room. A photo of just us. laughing on the porch. I placed that one front and center. If this story is making you feel something, don't scroll away. What happens next is the moment everything collides. Christmas Eve finally arrives, and my family shows up expecting tradition, but finds me waiting at the door instead. Christmas Eve morning came quietly. No alarms. No chaos. Just the sound of waves rolling in outside the window. I woke up in my grandmother's bed, my bed now, and lay there staring at the ceiling, letting the reality settle. Today was the day. I showered slowly. Dried my hair. Chose my clothes with intention. A deep red sweater, my grandmother's favorite color. She used to say red was for people who refused to disappear. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I'd changed how I looked, but because I'd finally stopped shrinking. At 8:30 a.m., my phone rang. "Ms. Carter, this is Deputy Webb. I'm on my way." "Thank you," I said. "I'll be ready." I laid everything out on the dining table like a presentation I'd rehearsed in silence for months. The deed. The will. Tax records. Contractor invoices. Copies of eviction notices, one for every adult family member. If you're still watching, tap like now, because what happened next took me 15 years to earn. Deputy Webb arrived just after 10. He reviewed every document carefully, nodding as he worked. "This is solid," he said finally. "You really own this place." "I know. And they don't. They will in a couple of hours." He looked at me for a moment. "Once this happens, there's no undoing it." I thought of 15 empty holidays. I'm sure. At 11:47 a.m., I saw the first car turn onto the gravel road. My mother's silver SUV. Then my sister's. Then another. And another. 6 vehicles total. 23 people. Suitcases. Gift bags. Food containers. They spilled out like they owned the place, because they thought they did. From the upstairs window, I watched my mother walk toward the front door, keys in hand, posture confident. She always carried herself like ownership was something you could claim just by believing it hard enough. My sister followed close behind, directing her husband. "Put the big bags in the master bedroom." My bedroom. The children ran ahead, laughing, shouting about the beach. Behind them, unnoticed, Deputy Webb's patrol car rolled quietly into the driveway. I walked downstairs. Each step creaked under my feet. The same staircase I'd crept down years ago, hoping not to draw attention. Today, I didn't slow down. I reached the front door just as my mother inserted her key. Click. She frowned. Jiggled it. "What the, Richard, the lock isn't working." I opened the door from the inside. The silence that followed was complete. For 3 full seconds, no one spoke. My mother froze, key still in her hand. Her mouth opened like she was about to complain, then she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Good morning," I said calmly. My sister stepped forward, confused. "Did you change the locks?" "Yes. On Mom's house." She snapped. "It's not your house. If you've ever waited years to say one sentence, this is where you lean in." My mother laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous." "That's enough," Deputy Webb said, stepping into view. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Marcus Webb. I've reviewed the documents. This property belongs to Elena Carter." The words landed like dropped glass. My sister shook her head. "That's impossible." I handed over the folder. The will. The deed. The truth. My mother's face drained of color as she flipped through the pages. She was confused, she whispered. She didn't know what she was doing. "She did," I said. "And she planned for you to say that." I took a breath. "I need everyone to understand something," I continued. None of you were invited here today. Gasps. Murmurs. Shock. I handed out the eviction notices one by one. You have 30 minutes to remove your belongings. After that, you'll be escorted off the property. My cousin tried to joke. It's Christmas Eve. I know. My sister grabbed her daughter closer. You can't do this. I already did. Quick question, do you think boundaries are cruel, or necessary? Comment cruel or necessary. I'm reading. Cars began to load again. Suitcases dragged back over gravel. Conversations fell apart into whispers. My mother stood frozen, staring at me like she was seeing a stranger. You look just like him, she said suddenly. And that's when the truth finally came out. My mother explains why she erased me for 15 years, and what she says next changes how everyone sees her forever. When my mother said it, the world seemed to pause. You look just like him. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was tired. For a moment, no one understood what she meant. My sister frowned. My stepfather shifted uncomfortably. The wind moved across the porch, cold and sharp. Like who? Meredith asked. My mother swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Your father, she said, not looking at me. David. The name hit me like a memory I wasn't allowed to have. My biological father. The man who died when I was 3. The man whose photos disappeared. The man no one spoke about. Before I go on, if you've ever felt punished for something you didn't choose, stay with me. This part matters. Richard stepped forward, his voice low. Diane, what are you talking about? She laughed once, bitter and hollow. I'm talking about the mistake I made when I was 19. Every head turned toward her. He ruined my life, she said suddenly, louder now. Your father was a dreamer. An artist. Always chasing beauty, never stability. We were broke. All the time. And then he died, and I was left with nothing but debt and regret. My sister stared at her. Mom. Elena was a child. I know, she snapped. Then her voice broke. I know. But every time I looked at her, I saw him. His eyes. His face. Everything I tried to forget. The silence was suffocating. I felt something strange rise in my chest, not anger. Clarity. So you erased me, I said quietly. Because I reminded you of a man who's been dead for 30 years. She didn't deny it. I didn't plan it, she whispered. It just happened. One Christmas became 2. 2 became routine. Aunt Patty stepped forward, her voice shaking. You let your own daughter spend 15 Christmases alone. My mother finally looked at me then. I told myself you preferred it. That I liked being alone. I asked. She nodded weakly. I laughed, not loudly, not cruelly. Just once. Did it ever occur to you to ask? She didn't answer. If you're watching this and feeling angry for me, tap like, because I felt it too. Just not the way you think. My sister finally spoke. You taught me she didn't care. You taught me she chose distance. I looked at Meredith. You never questioned why I never came. She looked away. Deputy Webb cleared his throat. Ma'am, regardless of family matters, the legal issue stands. I know, my mother said. Then she turned back to me. You're really going to do this? Throw us out? I met her eyes. The same eyes everyone said I inherited from a man she hated. You threw me out first, I said. Just slowly. Her face crumpled for half a second. For one brief moment, I thought she might apologize. She didn't. You're cruel, she said instead. That word didn't hurt the way it used to. I learned from the best, I replied. The deputy checked his watch. 15 minutes. Cars continued loading. Children were ushered inside. No one laughed anymore. My mother lingered on the porch. Yenna, she whispered. Please. You know what's strange? That word, please, used to be all I wanted. But now. You had 15 years to say that, I told her. You chose silence instead. I stepped back into the house and closed the door. Not slammed it. Just closed it. Behind the glass, I watched them leave. One car. Then another. Gravel crunching beneath tires. Traditions dissolving in real time. There was one knock. I tensed. Elena, a familiar voice said softly. It's Aunt Patty. I opened the door. She stood alone, eyes red. I should have fought harder, she said. I knew something was wrong. I let her in. Behind us, the last car disappeared down the road. Before we go on, do you think honesty excuses harm, or does damage still count even if the truth comes out later? Comment excuse or still counts. Because what happened next wasn't about revenge. It was about release. Everyone is gone, but one person stays behind, carrying a message my grandmother left just for me. The house felt different once they were gone. Not empty, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache. The kind that finally lets you breathe. Aunt Patty stood near the fireplace, rubbing her hands together like she didn't know what to do with them now that everything had been said. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. My mother had bought it during the renovations. I filled it anyway. We sat at the table where my family had eaten together for years without me. I should have done more, Patty said finally. Every year I asked Diane why you weren't there. She always had an answer ready. She was good at that, I said. Patty nodded. Convincing. And I let myself believe it because it was easier than pushing back. That word again. Easier. If you've ever realized silence made you complicit, stay with me. This part is uncomfortable, but it matters. Patty reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Your grandmother gave me this 2 months before she died. She made me promise not to show you until after everything. My hands shook as I opened it. Make sure she knows she wasn't imagining things. Everything she felt was real. I pressed the paper to my chest and let the tears come, real ones this time. Not the quiet, controlled kind. The kind I'd swallowed for 15 years. She saw it all, Patty said softly. And she was proud of you. After Patty left, I walked through the house alone. Room by room. Not as a visitor. Not as a ghost. As the owner. I turned over the framed family photo on the coffee table and slid it into a drawer. Then I stood in front of the mantelpiece and looked at the photo of my grandmother and me, laughing on the porch. I did it, I whispered. I showed up. The house seemed to exhale. 3 days later, the messages started. Group chats I'd never been part of suddenly included me. Some were angry. What you did was cruel. You ruined Christmas. Grandma would be ashamed. I didn't respond. But others surprised me. I didn't know you weren't invited. I thought you chose to be alone. I should have reached out. For 15 years, my mother controlled the story. And people believed it because it required nothing from them. Now that story was cracked open. Quick pause, have you ever realized people believed a lie about you simply because it was convenient? Comment yes if that hits. Richard called on New Year's Eve. I almost ignored it. But something told me not to. I didn't know how bad it was, he said. That's not an excuse. Just the truth. You were there every Christmas, I replied. You never wondered why I wasn't. There was a long silence. Because it was easier not to, he said quietly. There it was again. I thanked him for calling. I didn't forgive him. I didn't yell. I just told him the truth, that silence is a choice, and he'd made it for years. Then my mother called. From a different number. She didn't apologize. She negotiated. Maybe we can share the house, she suggested. It has sentimental value. No, I said calmly. You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. When she accused my grandmother of confusion, I ended the call. And blocked her. For the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for her to change. If you've ever blocked someone not out of anger, but out of self-respect, tap like. You know how heavy that decision feels. In February, I moved into the beach house permanently. I painted walls. Rearranged furniture. Turned memory into something livable. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet, I found a small envelope taped to the back of a frame. To be opened on your first Christmas as owner. My hands trembled. Inside was one last letter from my grandmother. And what she wrote finally answered the question that haunted me my entire life. I read the letter my grandmother hid just for this moment, and it changes how I see my mother, my past, and myself forever. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope resting in my hands. Cream-colored paper. My name written in my grandmother's familiar, uneven handwriting. To be opened on your first Christmas as owner. I didn't rush. For most of my life, I'd learned how to wait. I opened it slowly. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means you did it. You stopped being invisible. My chest tightened. I wish I could be there to see it. I watched for years while your mother tried to erase you, and it broke my heart. I hoped, foolishly, that she would change. I paused, letting that sink in. She never could forgive herself for loving your father. And because she couldn't forgive him, she punished the part of him that lived on in you. Tears blurred the words. That was never your burden to carry. If this letter feels like something you needed to hear too, stay with me. This part isn't just about me. I'm leaving you this house not as revenge, but as recognition. You earned it through love, patience, and presence. You showed up when no one else did. I folded the letter and held it against my chest. For the first time, the question that haunted me for decades finally loosened its grip. What did I do wrong? The answer was simple. Nothing. My grandmother didn't excuse my mother's behavior, but she explained it. And somehow, that explanation freed me more than anger ever could. Understanding isn't forgiveness. It's release. That Christmas, I didn't invite my family. I invited 4 people. Aunt Patty arrived first, carrying a casserole dish and a nervous smile. Then Beth and Carmen, my closest friends from Raleigh. The ones who'd been there when holidays were quiet and birthdays went unnoticed. And finally, Marcus, a coworker who'd gone through a rough divorce and admitted he hated Christmas. Are you sure? He'd asked when I invited him. I know what it's like to be alone, I told him. No one should be if they don't want to be. We sat around a table meant for 12. 4 people. Real laughter. No pretending. On the mantelpiece, I placed one photo. My grandmother and me. If you believe family is about choice, not blood, comment family is chosen. I want to see how many of you feel this. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stepped onto the porch alone. The ocean stretched out into darkness. The waves moved in steady rhythm. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who waited quietly for invitations that never came. I thought about my mother. She called twice more that winter. From different numbers. Different tones. Anger. Guilt. Bargaining. Never an apology. I didn't answer. I realized something important: forgiveness requires accountability. And without it, forgiveness becomes permission. I wasn't willing to give that anymore. In March, my sister showed up unexpectedly. Her car sat in the driveway for a full minute before she got out. I'm not here to fight, she said. I just didn't know. I believed her. And I also knew belief didn't erase impact. We talked. Carefully. Honestly. I didn't offer reconciliation. I offered honesty. The door wasn't closed, but it wasn't wide open either. If you've ever learned that boundaries aren't walls, but doors with locks, tap like. That lesson changes everything. Over the months, I rebuilt my life slowly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just truthfully. I stopped explaining myself to people who never asked questions before. I stopped chasing approval from people who benefited from my silence. And for the first time, I stopped shrinking. On the last night of the year, I stood on the porch again, watching fireworks bloom faintly in the distance. I whispered into the night, "I'm okay now." And I meant it. My mother tries one last time to pull me back, and I finally decide whether forgiveness has a place in my future, or if peace means letting go completely. By spring, I had settled into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Work calls in the afternoon. Evenings with the sound of the ocean filling spaces that used to feel empty. The house no longer felt like borrowed ground, it felt like mine. That's when my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I knew who it was before I answered. "Yenna," my mother said softly. "Please don't hang up." I closed my eyes. "I just want to talk," she continued. "I think we can fix this." Fix. That word had carried so much weight in my life. Fix the silence. Fix the distance. Fix something I never broke. "What exactly do you want to fix?" I asked. "The house," she said quickly. "And us." There it was. She talked about memories. About tradition. About how much the beach house meant to everyone. She never said "I'm sorry." If you're listening closely, you'll notice what's missing. That absence matters. "I'm not sharing the house," I said calmly. "I'm not asking to share," she replied. "Just access. Holidays. A schedule. I'll handle the maintenance." "You mean control," I said. Her voice sharpened. "You're being cold." "No," I replied. "I'm being honest." She sighed dramatically. "You're punishing me." "I'm protecting myself." Silence. Then she tried something new. "Your grandmother wouldn't want this," she said. That line almost worked. Almost. "She wanted me to stop being invisible," I said. "And this is me doing that." If you've ever heard someone use guilt as a bargaining chip, tap like. You know exactly how heavy that tactic feels. Her tone changed again. Softer. "I lost so much, Elena. I lost your father. I lost my youth. And I lost my childhood," I said. "We both lost things. Only one of us made it the other's fault." She didn't respond. I waited. Nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I don't know how to be your mother anymore." The truth landed between us. "I don't need you to be my mother," I said gently. "I needed that years ago." We ended the call without resolution. I blocked the number. Not in anger. In acceptance. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you give to make someone else feel better. It's something you give when it no longer costs you peace. And right now, peace mattered more. A week later, a small package arrived. No return address. Inside was an old photo. My mother. Young. Smiling. Holding me as a baby. On the back, one sentence written in shaky ink. "I didn't know how to love you without hurting myself." I stared at it for a long time. Understanding arrived quietly. Pain doesn't excuse harm, but it explains it. I placed the photo in a drawer. Not displayed. Not destroyed. Just acknowledged. Quick check-in. Do you believe closure comes from conversations, or from decisions? Comment, talk, or decide. There's no wrong answer. That summer, I learned how to live without waiting. Without scanning my phone for messages that never came. Without hoping someone would finally choose me. I hosted dinners. I made friends in town. I built routines that didn't revolve around absence. My sister texted sometimes. Neutral updates. No pressure. I responded when I felt ready. The door stayed unlocked, but I held the key. One evening, while organizing paperwork, I found something unexpected in the filing cabinet Harold had given me. A legal note my grandmother had added in the final year of her life. It wasn't about property. It was about truth. And reading it forced me to confront one final decision I'd been avoiding. I uncover one last thing my grandmother left behind, and it puts my mother's story, and my own future, in a completely new light. The document wasn't long. Just a single page, tucked between legal folders my grandmother labeled important. No stamps. No seals. Just her handwriting. This is not for lawyers. That's how it began. I sat at the kitchen table reading it twice before the weight of it settled. I don't know if Elena will ever read this. But if she does, it means she's ready to stop asking why. I exhaled slowly. Diane didn't become cruel overnight. She became afraid. Afraid of regret. Afraid of failure. Afraid of seeing herself honestly. My grandmother didn't defend her. She explained her. People who refuse to face their pain often redirect it. And children become easy places to aim. That line hit harder than anything else. If you've ever been someone's emotional shield, pause with me for a second. This realization changes everything. I tried to intervene. I argued. I begged. I failed. That was the first time she admitted it. Silence is not neutral. It sides with harm. I closed my eyes. That sentence didn't just belong to my family. It belonged to every quiet observer. Every relative who noticed something was wrong and chose comfort instead. If Elena reads this, I hope she understands one thing: she doesn't need reconciliation to heal. The paper trembled in my hands. Some people can only love others to the extent they've faced themselves. And my mother never had. I folded the note carefully and placed it back where I found it. Not because I was done with it. But because I was done with the question it answered. Why me? Why not them? Why alone? Because sometimes survival requires someone to carry what others refuse to face. That summer, I made a decision. Not dramatic. Not loud. Permanent. I wouldn't chase closure anymore. I wouldn't rehearse imaginary conversations or wait for accountability that would never arrive. I chose peace. If you've ever realized closure doesn't come from answers, but from acceptance, tap like. That moment changes you. In August, my sister sent me a message. Mom isn't doing well. I stared at the screen. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Finally, I wrote. I hope she finds help. And that was it. No visits. No meetings. No rescues. That wasn't cruelty. That was boundary. In September, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Friends. Neighbors. Laughter without tension. Stories without caution. For the first time, the beach house wasn't a monument to exclusion. It was a home. One night, sitting on the porch, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not numb. Free. Anger needs an audience. Peace doesn't. Before we go on, do you think letting go is weakness or strength? Comment weak or strong. I'm curious how you see it. In October, my mother tried one last approach. A letter. Not an apology. Not a confession. A memory. She wrote about a Christmas long ago. About me at 5 years old, wearing a sweater she'd knitted herself. About how she'd loved me once, before everything felt heavy. I read it once. Then I put it away. Love remembered is not the same as love practiced. By November, I stopped checking my phone on holidays. Stopped bracing. Stopped waiting. On the first anniversary of my grandmother's death, I walked down to the beach alone at sunrise. I held her letters. Her truth. Her faith in me. And I understood what she'd given me wasn't just a house. It was permission. Permission to stop proving my worth to people who benefited from my doubt. I whispered into the wind, I get it now. And for the first time, I felt complete. I'll tell you what finally replaced anger in my life, and why the ending of this story isn't about revenge, but about something far rarer. I used to think anger was the strongest emotion. It kept me alert. It gave shape to the hurt. It made sense of why things had gone wrong. For years, it was the only thing that proved what happened to me was real. But anger burns fast. And one day, I realized it wasn't there anymore. Not because I'd forced it out. Not because I'd forgiven anyone. It simply had nothing left to protect. What replaced it was quieter. Peace. Not the kind you post about. The kind that shows up when you stop explaining yourself to people who never asked questions in the first place. If you've ever reached that moment, tap like. You know how rare it is. By winter, my life had shrunk in the best possible way. Fewer people. Clearer conversations. No second guessing. I worked remotely. I walked the beach every morning. I learned what silence felt like when it wasn't rejection. My sister sent me a photo one day. Her daughter, my niece, wearing a red sweater. The same color my grandmother loved. I think she looks like you, Meredith wrote. I stared at it longer than I expected. Maybe cycles don't break all at once. Maybe they crack slowly. I replied, she looks happy. And I meant it. There were moments I wondered if my mother thought about me. If she scrolled through photos now the way I once had. But that thought didn't hurt anymore. It felt neutral. Because I'd learned something essential, you don't need someone to miss you to move forward. You just need to stop waiting. Quick check, have you ever confused endurance with love? Comment yes if that realization came late for you. December returned again. This time, I didn't dread it. I planned Christmas intentionally. Not out of tradition. Out of choice. 4 people came. Aunt Patty. Beth. Carmen. And Marcus, who admitted this was the first Christmas he hadn't felt invisible since his divorce. We cooked together. We laughed. We didn't perform. On the mantel, I placed one photo. Not the big family portrait. The one of my grandmother and me. That night, after everyone slept, I sat by the fire alone. I thought about all the versions of myself that had survived. The child who waited by the window. The teenager who stopped asking. The woman who finally said no. They all led here. To a life that didn't require permission. If this story has made you reflect on your own boundaries, drop a comment. You never know who else needs to read it. On Christmas morning, I found one final surprise. A card slipped behind the photo frame. Not new. Not recently placed. It must have been there all along. You don't owe anyone your presence. You offer it. I smiled. That sentence felt like closure. Not reconciliation. Not apology. Truth. And that truth changed how I moved through the world. Because when you stop begging to be seen, the right people finally notice. I'll tell you what forgiveness actually looks like when it's real, and why it doesn't always involve the people who hurt you. For a long time, I thought forgiveness meant reconciliation. That if I didn't rebuild bridges, I was somehow failing at healing. That being the bigger person meant reopening doors, even when I knew what waited on the other side. I don't believe that anymore. Forgiveness isn't access. It isn't proximity. And it definitely isn't pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness, when it's real, is internal. It's the moment you stop letting someone else's damage dictate your decisions. If you've ever struggled with that idea, stay with me. This part closes a circle. People still ask me about my mother. Do I hate her? Do I miss her? Do I plan to reconnect someday? The honest answer is simpler than people expect. I don't feel urgency. And urgency used to control everything. I forgave my mother the way you forgive a storm for being destructive. Not because it was harmless, but because holding it responsible forever doesn't rebuild the house. Forgiveness didn't give her access back into my life. It gave me my energy back. Quick pause, do you think forgiveness is something you do for others, or for yourself? Comment them or me. I want to see how you see it. In April, I ran into someone unexpected at the grocery store. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't know, she said immediately. About any of it. I nodded. I should have noticed, she continued. You were just gone. Yes, I said. I was. That was the end of it. No explanations. No emotional labor. Just truth. And that was enough. The strange thing about healing is that it doesn't announce itself. There's no moment where music swells and everything clicks. It shows up quietly. Like realizing you didn't brace when your phone rang. Like noticing a holiday passed without dread. Like laughing without checking who's watching. That summer, I started writing again. Not about my family. About myself. Things I liked. Things I wanted. Things I'd never asked for because I didn't believe I was allowed. I stopped narrating my life for an imaginary audience that never showed up. And that's when something unexpected happened. People started showing up. Not because I chased them. But because I finally stopped hiding. If you've ever felt like your real life started late, tap like. You're not behind. My sister sent me a message in June. Mom asks about you sometimes. I stared at the screen. I replied, I hope she's okay. That was all. No bitterness. No longing. Just neutrality. And neutrality felt like freedom. A few weeks later, Aunt Patty visited again. We walked the beach at sunset. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. I believed her. Because pride doesn't come from obedience. It comes from truth. Before we move into the final part, I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, and lost yourself in the process? Comment yes if you know that feeling. Because next isn't about my family anymore. It's about what comes after survival. I'll tell you how this story truly ends, and what I learned about belonging that changed my life forever. For most of my life, I believed belonging was something you earned. If I stayed quiet. If I didn't ask for too much. If I waited long enough. One day, they would finally notice. They never did. And the hardest truth I had to accept wasn't that my family excluded me, it was that I kept waiting for them to change. The moment I stopped waiting, everything else began. Belonging, I learned, isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself first. If this story has stayed with you till the end, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Stories like this exist because people need to know they're not alone. This year, I hosted Christmas again. Same house. Same ocean outside the window. Different energy. 5 people sat around the table. Aunt Patty. Beth. Carmen. Marcus. And me. No tension. No pretending. No history hanging in the air like a warning. Just presence. On the mantelpiece sat one photo. Not the big family portrait. The one of my grandmother and me, laughing, sunlit, real. She didn't give me this house to punish anyone. She gave it to me so I would finally take up space. Quick question before we end, do you believe you can create your own family, or does blood always come first? Comment create or blood. I read every response. That night, after everyone left, I stepped onto the porch alone. The waves rolled in, steady and patient. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who watched holidays pass through a screen, wondering what she'd done wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. She was just born into silence. And silence taught her endurance. But endurance isn't the same as love. Love shows up. I no longer hate my mother. I don't miss her either. I've accepted that some people can only love others to the depth they've faced themselves. And that's not something I can fix. What I can do is refuse to disappear for anyone ever again. If you've ever felt invisible, hear this clearly. You don't need permission to take up space. You don't need approval to be worthy. And you don't need closure from people who benefited from your silence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop knocking on doors that never open. And build your own table instead. That's what I did. And for the first time in my life, I belong. Before you go, share this story with someone who needs it. You never know who's sitting alone, thinking it's their fault. Thank you for listening.